All right, let's get right into it. There's this quiet but massive rebellion happening right under our noses in the world of global finance. It's a huge shift away from the US dollar and towards, well, gold. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why this is going on and what it could mean for, the entire global economy. So get this, you've got these huge economic powerhouses, right? Countries like India and China, and they are on an absolutely massive gold buying spree. But here's the part that makes you scratch your head. They're buying it when gold prices are through the roof at all-time highs. Now, that doesn't sound like your typical buy low, sell high investment plan, does it? No, this isn't just about making a quick buck. It's something way, way bigger. This is a calculated strategic play. And I want you to really look at the scale of this thing. This isn't just a little trend, a minor portfolio adjustment. No, the amount of gold bought up in just 2022 and 2023, it completely dwarfs the average of the entire decade before that. I mean, it's not even close. This tells us it's a coordinated strategic pivot away from what used to be the absolute bedrock of global finance. Okay, so the big question is, where's the money for this giant gold shopping spree coming from? I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars. Well, they're funding it by selling off something they've held on to for decades, something they've relied on, US Treasuries. And honestly, what they're selling tells us just as much as what they're buying. Let's take India, for example, to see just how dramatic this is. Just a year ago, they were holding about $240 billion in US Treasury bonds. I mean, that's a huge cornerstone of their national savings. Fast forward just 1 year, and that number drops to $190 billion. They sold off a staggering $50 billion worth of US debt in 12 months. And where do you think that money went? Yep, a big chunk of it was plowed right back into physical gold. And it's not just India, not by a long shot. China is on an even more aggressive, long-term path here. They've been steadily reducing their holdings of US debt, bringing them down to the lowest levels we've seen since the 2008 financial crisis. Let's be clear. This isn't a panic sell-off. It's a very deliberate, very calculated rebalancing of their entire financial strategy. Okay, so why is selling US Treasuries such a huge deal? Well, first, let's do a quick refresher on what a US Treasury even is. It's really simple. Think of it as an IOU from the US government. When a country, or anyone, buys a treasury, they're basically lending money to the US. In return, the government promises to pay that money back, plus a little extra in interest. Super straightforward. And for decades, I mean, literally decades, these IOUs were considered the safest asset on the planet, the undisputed king. Why? Because they're backed by the full faith and credit of the US government. The risk of the US not paying you back was basically zero. They were the ultimate financial safety net, the bedrock for settling international trade, for stabilizing currencies, the whole shebang. So that's the big question, right? If treasuries were the safest, most reliable thing you could possibly own, what on earth changed? Why are countries like India and China suddenly backing away? Well, it turns out the game has changed, and it all boils down to two major new risks. Yeah, the confidence in US debt is being chipped away from two different angles. First, you've got your classic financial risk. But second, and maybe more importantly, there's a new, pretty unpredictable geopolitical risk that's got everyone on edge. So the financial risk part is pretty straightforward. Think about it. When new interest rates go up, the value of older bonds with lower rates goes down. It's like if you bought a bond that pays 2% and now new bonds are paying 5%, your old bond just isn't as attractive, right? So as central banks around the world jacked up rates to fight inflation, holding those older bonds meant you were technically losing money. But honestly, that financial risk, it's small potatoes compared to the geopolitical one. The real game changer, the moment that sent a shockwave through finance ministries all over the world, was when the US and its allies froze Russia's dollar assets in 2022. That was a massive wake-up call for everyone. All of a sudden, countries realized that their safest asset in the world wasn't actually safe from everything. It was only safe as long as they stayed on the right side of US foreign policy. Imagine having billions of dollars in your national savings account and realizing it could be frozen instantly with the flip of a switch because of a political disagreement. That completely changes how you think about risk, doesn't it? So, faced with these new kinds of financial and political threats, where do you put your money? Well, central banks are looking back to something ancient, something reliable, and something that is completely 100% politically neutral: physical gold. And when you put them side by side, it becomes crystal clear why. Sure, US Treasuries pay you interest, which is nice, but they come with this huge vulnerability to sanctions and political risk. Gold, on the other hand, doesn't pay any interest. But, and this is the big but, it's a physical asset that you can hold in your own vault. No one can freeze it remotely. It carries zero political baggage and has no default risk. It's basically the ultimate financial insurance policy in an uncertain world. Now, this massive pivot from US debt to gold, it's about more than just tweaking a national investment portfolio. This is actually a key piece of a much bigger, slow-moving global trend that experts have a name for: de-dollarization. But let's be really clear about what that means. It's not about countries trying to completely abandon the dollar tomorrow. That's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. The real goal here is to reduce their over-dependence on the dollar. They want to build a system where their economies aren't so heavily tied to the political and financial decisions made in just one country. And here you can see what that actually looks like in practice. Think of a central bank's reserves as a pie. For decades, the slice for US dollar assets was huge. I mean, it dominated the whole thing. Now, what they're doing is intentionally shrinking that dollar slice and growing the slice for gold. They're also adding more of other currencies and things called SDRs, which are basically special reserve funds from the IMF. It's all about diversification and having more control over their own financial destiny. And all of this leads to a pretty jaw-dropping conclusion. For the first time in decades, the total value of gold held by central banks around the world is now more than the value of the US Treasuries they hold. I want to repeat that because it's huge. This isn't some future prediction. This is a historic tipping point that has already happened. We've crossed the threshold. Which, of course, brings us to the final critical question. This whole global gold rush, it was never just about a shiny metal. It's about nations actively trying to build a new kind of financial world. A world with multiple poles of power, not just one. So as this trend continues, as more countries diversify away from the dollar, are we witnessing the beginning of the end for the dollar's decades-long undisputed dominance? And if so, what comes next?